Happy Thanksgiving Eve and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Wednesday, November 27th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. Today on the show, we are taking a look at Chris's early top 50 starting pitchers for 2025. We did the same thing with Scott on our previous episode, so a little bit of compare and contrast, see who Chris might be higher or lower on heading into next season. And we had some moves. We had a trade between the Royals and Reds that went down last Friday. Jonathan India for Brady Singer and other pieces. And Yusei Kikuchi signed with the Angels. Like the Angels, the busiest team in baseball all of a sudden.
Team cooking so far on the hot stove.
Yeah. Speaking of cooking, how you doing, Chris? How are you spending the next few days? Because it's a busy week, man.
Yeah.
Used to be like a party day for people, but we're kind of getting old, Chris. And then there's Thanksgiving and Black Friday and all that fun stuff.
I have no. Well, actually, Thanksgiving Eve tonight, as we're not recording, but as we're releasing, is my 15-year wedding anniversary, which makes me sound way older than I am because we got married when we were 21. But we are going to get some fancy burgers for dinner. I don't know if you've ever heard of Au Cheval, but great burgers. So that's our fancy anniversary plan. And then my mom and sister are in town, and we're hosting Thanksgiving in our tiny apartment with like 11 people coming over. So
whoa,
it's I just finished all my shopping. I have like a schedule. My mom's gonna make the turkey. She makes great turkey. So I'm looking forward to it. I also just have had like a low level of anxiety for the last 7 straight days, just thinking about everything with Thanksgiving. So love it. It'll be great. Great food. Looking forward to it passing as well.
Yeah, man. Good luck. Obviously as a native New Yorker, I helped you move. I've seen your apartment. It's a nice apartment, but once you get 11 people in there,
it's going to be pretty cramped. Yeah. It's going to be one of those, it's a little chilly outside. We'll have 10 people cramped in our small apartment. The windows are going to fog up. It's going to be that kind of crowded in here. So it'll be fun. It'll be nice. Haven't seen my mom and sister in a while. So I'm looking forward to it. It's just, the holidays are a stressful time. Many movies have been made about this very topic. I'm not saying anything novel. I hope you have a good time. Are you going to be with your family?
Yeah. I usually do the split thing. I'm with the in-laws for dinner, although, it's always kind of like an early dinner and then go over to my parents for dessert. And so, it's a good time. There'll be football. We usually watch Just Friends. It's like a Thanksgiving tradition. We always watch Just Friends.
Movie.
Fantastic movie. So it's a kickstart to the holiday season.
I'll throw on Martin Scorsese's The Last Waltz, the greatest Thanksgiving movie of all time.
I haven't seen it. Should I see it?
It's the band, the band. The band.
No,
it's a band called The Band.
Okay,
and it was their last performance, and they did a Thanksgiving performance. It's great stuff. Sweet. Bob Dylan shows up. Neil Young. It's great stuff. You should watch it.
All right, let's get into some news and notes.
Ask your dad.
Yeah, he probably would know something about that. Let's hit this. First, we'll get the news and stuff out of the way, and then we'll get into your rankings, Chris. The Reds, they acquired Brady Singer from the Royals for Jonathan India and Joey Wiemer. And if we're being completely honest, honesty is the best policy. This is a bad trade all around for fantasy because India is going to a bad hitter's park and Brady Singer is going to a really bad pitcher's park. So India this past season, he hit 248, 15 home runs, 84 runs scored, 13 steals. Chris, your thoughts here? I guess, let's start with the India side of this. What do you think here for Jonathan India?
I don't hate it as much for India as I do for Singer, because while Kauffman Stadium is a spacious park, it is a roomy park. It is a tough place to hit home runs, especially compared to the Great American Ballpark, which is kind of on the opposite of that spectrum. But in terms of actual run scoring, Kansas City is not that much worse than Cincinnati. Over the past 3 years, Cincinnati has a 105 park factor. Kauffman Stadium has a 104, according to Baseball Savant. And a big part of that is, for whatever reason, Kauffman Stadium tends to suppress strikeouts. And in specifically singles, home runs, and singles, doubles, and triples are all inflated at Kauffman Stadium. Home runs are massively deflated. Jonathan India, not a big home run hitter anyway, so maybe he goes from, I don't know, you project 15 to 12. But could this get him to, with his pretty solid plate discipline, more like a 275, 280 batting average? I could see that. And he walks a decent amount and he'll be at the top of the lineup, and the Royals have been willing to run. So maybe he goes from 15 homers last season to 12. Decent chance that he scores 90 plus runs. And, if he pairs that with a 275 average and 15 to 20 stolen bases, I know he's never stolen more than 14, but, maybe they're a little more aggressive. Maybe he's, gets a little, a bit more volume. And yeah, I could see Jonathan India being a pre-23 breakout, pre-23 Brandon Nimmo. He's hit for a little more power lately, and I think ran more last year, if I'm remembering correctly. But
Nimmo did, yeah. Yeah,
that high OBP, a lot of runs, not necessarily a standout for fantasy, but a useful player. I could see Jonathan India being that. I don't know if I ranked Brady Singer in my top 80 as starting pitcher. I basically have even in a 15-team league, I'm not sure I would have much interest in him.
Yeah, I actually agree completely. Jonathan India, I don't think he has big upside, but for those who play in any format with a middle infield spot, a second base, shortstop, and middle infield spot, then I do think India is going to be in play. I think there's a high floor there. He's going to lead off. That's what the Royals specifically wanted India for in this deal. So he's going to hit ahead of Bobby Witt, Vinny P, Salvador Perez. Mm-hmm. He should score a boatload of runs. So the home runs, I agree, they're coming back. He has 63 career home runs, Jonathan India. According to StatCast, he would have 42 if he played all of his career games at Kauffman Stadium. So, 260 to 270, 10 homers, but 90 runs scored and 15 to 20 steals. That's a viable, solid option. Again, he's not going to blow the doors off, but I think he can be serviceable. Brady Singer.
He is my number 100 SP. And
that might be too high.
That might be too, because I know he was useful last year, and there was really a long stretch. I think he fell apart over the last 2 months, but he had a sub-3 ERA as late as July 31st. I have to imagine he faced the White Sox 12 times. Just a rough guess. I think it was only 4. But the underlying numbers were really bad all along. He had a 4.65 xERA. Okay, you could maybe think, okay, a guy who gets hit hard, maybe that doesn't hurt him as much as at Kauffman Stadium. I think it's going to be a real problem in Cincinnati, and I think there's a pretty good chance he's not even in the rotation the whole season.
Yeah, so it was a 3.71 ERA, a 1.27 WHIP for Singer, but as you pointed out, the underlying numbers not nearly as good. And the flip side to what I said about India, Brady Singer has allowed 82 career home runs. According to StatCast, he would have allowed 113 if he pitched every single inning in Great American Ballpark. So it's a better real life move for them. They need people. They need
you need innings. Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. But from a fantasy perspective, maybe he's a streamer on the road in the right matchup. But yeah, I mean, just in general, I don't think Brady Singer is going to be rostered in many leagues. Let's talk about Yusei Kikuchi, who surprisingly signed a 3-year, $63 million deal. The contract is not all that surprising. The landing spot, the Angels. The Angels are seemingly the only team that's been busy so far, making just kind of random moves. They signed Travis d'Arnaud. They traded for Jorge Soler. Now they signed Yusei Kikuchi. And the biggest question, and this would have been the biggest question regardless, Chris, is can Kikuchi maintain the gains he made in Houston? So 10 starts with the Astros, a 2.70 ERA, a 0.93 WHIP, nearly a 26% K- walk rate, 13.7% swinging strike rate. He changed the pitch mix. He threw more sliders. I don't think this is something he's just going to forget how to do, but Tyler Anderson, a couple of years ago, he was awesome with the Dodgers, signed with the Angels, and his first year there, he was terrible. So what do you think about this landing spot here with Kikuchi?
I mean, the thing that's tough with Kikuchi is there really has never been more than like a 3-month stretch where Yusei Kikuchi has been the same pitcher. Like I'm looking at his StatCast, like rolling month by month, and it's like he had a stretch in 2022 where he threw his slider like 45% of the time. Last year, he opened up the season throwing his slider a bunch and then kind of never got rid of it, but went from like 35% to 23%, threw the curveball more. Last year, it was trading curveballs for sliders was the answer, and he's constantly tinkering. And the good thing is, I think at various points, Yusei Kikuchi will lock in and be very good. I don't know how much I love the idea of drafting him super high, and that probably would have been the case regardless of whether he was in Houston or went to Los Angeles or wherever. I think he's an inherently volatile pitcher who will have really good stretches. I don't think I ever want him as anything more than like an SP5 on my team.
Yeah. So the early ADP for Kikuchi through 61 NFBC drafts is 141.4. That seems pretty
reasonable.
I was going to say, I think that seems pretty high. So he's right between Jared Jones and Kodai Senga.
I'd rather have Jones.
The only projection system out right now is Steamer, and they have Kikuchi projected as the SP26. So I think that might be driving some of this early ADP cost. And my guess is this will drop down a little bit. If it's 141, by the time we get to February, March, I think it's probably closer to 175.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And it ultimately just comes down to like, there are other pitchers like this, Blake Snell being an obvious example on the high end, but there are always pitchers who just, it's going to be a ride. And that's the way I view Yusei Kikuchi, where I think I'd rather not be the one to draft him. I have him ranked in a similar range, so I'm not like super out on him. I think he's SP 46 or something for me, around 141 in my early overall rankings. But I kind of view it like I do Blake Snell, where it's like, let someone else draft him. If he gets off to a bad start, there's a decent chance Yusei Kikuchi gets dropped, or you can buy him for very little. And I do think, he'll have a stretch where he's very good. It's just, I don't trust him to be must start all year.
All right. The deadline to tender contracts was last Friday, and some notable names were non-tendered. Jordan Romano with the Blue Jays, who had arthroscopic surgery on his right elbow in July of last year. He had back-to-back seasons with 36 saves. And if you're just looking at the roster for now, Chad Green is the next man up. But, the Blue Jays are talking like they want to spend some money this offseason. So we'll see how their bullpen shakes out. Kyle Finnegan with the Nationals was non-tendered. He was coming off a career-high 38 saves, but the numbers plummeted in the second half. And it's just very curious as to why the Nationals, maybe they tried and there were no takers. Why didn't they trade him at the deadline if there was even a possibility that they would non-tender him in the offseason? So just don't really understand that one. And then
it's the same with Brendan Rodgers with the Rockies, where like they just chose not to trade him. Like your opinion of a player can't change that much in a 2-month span, right? Like, I want to understand. So I think the Nationals are one where I would bet that the leader in saves is not on this roster right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If for some reason they don't sign someone, Robert Garcia has some good underlying numbers there, but he's also a lefty. So, but yeah, they're talking like they want to spend money too. So my guess is the Nationals do sign some kind of closer this offseason. Brian De La Cruz, and how could you do this to me? Connor Joe were non-tendered by the Pirates. Brendan Rodgers and Cal Quantrill with the Rockies. Dylan Carlson with the Rays. Austin Hayes with the Phillies. Ramon Laureano and Griffin Canning with the Braves. So that Soler trade was solely
just a
salary dump for the Braves. Mike Tauchman, Nick Madrigal, and Patrick Wisdom with the Cubs, and Josh Rojas with the Mariners. Were there any other names you wanted to touch on there?
No, I mean, I don't know. Like Ramon Laureano was pretty good after he got to the Braves, but I don't think there's much there. We'll see. Like Cal Quantrill, he has interesting skills, and maybe Coors Field makes it kind of impossible to actually judge. So maybe he goes somewhere and signs in a pitcher's park and has some relevance next year. But none of these guys seem likely to matter.
All right. And the Red Sox have had internal discussions about moving Rafael Devers off third base. He does not grade out well. I mean, let's be honest, he's just not a good third baseman. So it sounds like first base is a possibility, but there's also Tristan Casas. So do they move Casas to DH? Do they trade Casas? Do they trade Yoshida? Again, there are
they would love to trade Yoshida. I was reading a Ken Rosenthal report today, actually, that they are just having trouble finding something. I think he's got like 3 years, $56 million left on his deal or something.
They're going to have to eat a chunk or attach.
And Casas has also been discussed in some trade rumors. It hasn't been like there's not a ton of smoke there, but I've seen his name. That would make sense. I wouldn't hate it for his value. Of course, Fenway Park is a tough place for left-handed power hitters. And like Bregman would seem like a good fit there. I mentioned, I think we talked about it on FFT and 5 last week, but Arenado, going to the Astros was one that I mentioned, but if there was any chance for him to revive his career, it would seem to be with a park with a very short left field fence. He's still a very good defender. So I could see Boston doing that if they miss out on some of the bigger name free agents.
Yeah. And obviously, if you're Boston, you'd rather not trade a young talent like Tristan Casas. Yeah. But, if you build a deal around Casas for Garrett Crochet, I mean, that feels like it makes a lot of sense for both sides. So, again, the Red Sox, there's going to be a lot that happens with this team in the offseason. Between Casas, Yoshida, all those left-handed outfielders, there's going to definitely be something that happens. Before we hit our first break, a reminder to sign up for the FBT newsletter if you haven't already. Scan the QR code if you're watching on YouTube. That will bring you right to the website. Click on that FBT logo. You hit subscribe, and it's easy as that. Let's take our first break when we return into Chris's top 50 starting pitchers right after this. Welcome back in. Chris's way too early top 50 starting pitchers for next season. We'll go in groups of 5. We'll make some comparisons between Scott and Chris's rankings here. And also worth noting, it's November 27th. So things are subject to change as, injuries come out or if we learn a new pitch and velocity and all that stuff. So
one thing for me is I have made a decent amount of progress on my overall rankings over the past couple of days. Not at all finished. These are all still, in my mind, very rough drafts. I will gladly admit right now, I think the last podcast we did with Scott, I moved someone like 12 spots down as we were talking, because it's like I'm open to being convinced at this point in the process. I haven't done a draft with these rankings yet. The 2 drafts I've done were before I had finished any of my rankings. So I have no idea how any of this looks right now. So I welcome the scrutiny. Tell me what is wrong with my rankings, please.
All right. Well, let's jump in. Top 5 for Chris. We have Tarek Skubal, Zach Wheeler, Paul Skeens, Corbin Burns, and Logan Gilbert. I think a pretty standard top 5. As we've mentioned, there's a pretty clear top 3 between Skubal, Wheeler, and Skeens in some order. But you opted to rank Burns as your SP4. Scott has Chris Sale as his SP4. And I mentioned I'm probably going to have Logan Gilbert as my SP4. Are you buying the adjustments that Corbin Burns made with his cutter towards the end of the season? And any concern about, first year mega contract? My guess is it's going to be in a new location. I don't think he'll be back with the Orioles.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Orioles need another starting pitcher after re-signing Corbin Burns. So I'm not sure exactly what the plan there is if Burns goes somewhere else, but I don't think we're ever going to get Corbin Burns of 2021 or 2022, right? Where he was a 11, 12, 13K per 9 guy. He was the best pitcher in baseball. I think we're past that. But what I see with Corbin Burns right now is a really high floor, as high a floor as a pitcher can have at this point. And there is room for the ceiling to improve. Maybe not back to 2021 or 2022 levels, but he was an above average strikeout pitcher in 2023. He was more like average in 2024. The fact that he acknowledged his cutter was not very good last year and put in the work in September, especially to get it back to where I think the whiff rate was like 27% in September with the cutter. He had a very good postseason start as well. That was actually like 26%, 27% is right around where he was in 2022. So I'm not saying I expect him to get back to that, but we saw a flash of it at the end of the season. And that was enough with the high floor for me to bake in some upside there where I think he is the number 4 SP.
All right, 6 through 10 in your rankings, you have Chris Sale, Cole Reagans, Garrett Crochet, George Kirby, and Dylan Cease. So Crochet, I think, going to be a really polarizing player all offseason. Mm-hmm. You actually have Crochet ranked a few spots higher than Scott does. Scott has him at SP10. You have Crochet at SP8. On a per inning basis, he was maybe the best pitcher in baseball last year. Among pitchers with 140 innings, Crochet was first in K- walk rate, first in Sierra, first in swinging strike rate, and 4th in expected ERA. The questions, where is he going to pitch? And how does his arm respond? Going from 25 total innings in 2023 all the way up to 146 this past season. Chris, if you were to draft Crochet, do you make it a priority to insulate him with other inning eater types, like maybe a Framber Valdez, Aaron Nola, or on the lower end, like a Seth Lugo or Jose Barrios, someone like that?
I think that's the approach you have to take. And I do think like a Garrett Crochet, Framber Valdez combo makes a lot of sense in terms of, upsides and downsides for those two players. Their strengths and weaknesses complement each other. The thing is, it's not just that he only threw 24 2/3 innings in 2023. He threw 54 1/3 in 2021. He threw 9 1/3 in 2020. He was not a full-time starter in college at all. So, this is by far the most innings Garrett Crochet has ever thrown in a season. Maybe he threw a lot in high school, but I assume not. So this is completely uncharted territory for him. And because of the way the White Sox handled him in the second half, and I'm not criticizing the way they handled him, it was frustrating, but I get why it happened. We just don't know what the impact of the innings that he threw. Like, if they had just let him go 140 innings and then cut him off whenever he hit that point, does he run out of steam in the same way? How much of the struggles in the second half were related to the mental side of, between the knowing you're never going to throw more than 4 innings in a start, and he didn't in any of his final 14 starts, and knowing you're pitching for a historically bad team, that's gonna mess with your competitiveness no matter who you are. And so I think there's a big unknown here. But then I look at still had 68 strikeouts in 44 2/3 innings in his final 14 starts. He still had a 339 FIP. It was a little higher than his first half, but still very, very good. And that was under, again, very difficult circumstances. So I think when you're talking about talent, I'm not sure there should be a big gap in Garrett Crochet and Paul Skeens per inning projections in 2025. I think he's in the discussion for best pitcher in baseball on a per inning basis based on what we saw last year. I have no idea how sustainable it is. I think it makes a lot of sense to be skeptical, and you will see a lot of pitchers who I am skeptical of in similar situations. But with Crochet, I do think the upside is he's the best pitcher in baseball on a per inning basis. So I'm willing to rank him that way, at least for now. That's also assuming he gets traded. I think it's one of the safest assumptions you can make this offseason. And no matter where he goes, it will be a team that you would project to win 40 plus games compared to what the White Sox did last year. So I don't look at the six wins last year. I think you project a fairly normal number of wins for Garrett Crochet as well. So there are durability concerns. There are projectability concerns. I get all that. Those just exist for Chris Sale had a huge innings jump. Cole Reagans had a huge inning jump. When you talk about everybody on this list, Kirby and Cease are very safe in terms of their inning projections, but there are a lot of Michael King is another guy who had a huge innings jump. So there's just a lot of guys in that situation. I think Garrett Crochet might just be the best of them, though.
You mentioned there might not be a huge difference on a per inning basis between Skeens and Crochet in 2025. Just wanted to point out that Skeens is currently projected as the SP3, according to Steamer. 188 innings, $35.50. That's in a 15-team league. Garrett Crochet is projected as the SP5, 170 innings, and a $30.8 player in a 15-team league. So
yeah,
it's not a huge difference, but you're getting like 2 or 3 rounds worth of value compared to where you have to take Paul Skeens versus Crochet. 11 through 15 in your rankings, you have Garrett Cole, Framber Valdez, Michael King, Pablo Lopez, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So one name here you are higher on than Scott is Pablo Lopez, who Scott has at SP19. You have here at 14. The underlying skills still look really good for Lopez, but he continues to pitch to a higher ERA than you'd like. It's 3.87 since coming over to the Twins last year. That's a 64 start stretch. It's not really a small sample size. All the underlying numbers say he should be better, but at some point, Chris, do we just accept that Pablo Lopez might be prone to having a higher ERA than we'd like?
I'm open to that. Yeah. I mean, it's, it was 3.75 his last year in Miami as well. So like he might just be a mid to high threes ERA guy, and that would be tough. The whip is always pretty decent, but not great. So I get the arguments against him. For me, it just comes down to actually one of the safer volume projections in baseball.
180 plus 3 years in a row.
Yeah. Like remember when he, before 2022, there were a lot of shoulder issues for him. He had only really managed to stay healthy in the shortened 2020 season. He hasn't had any issues the last 3 seasons. I think at this point, you kind of just say he's about as projectable as anyone. 234, 198 strikeouts the last 2 seasons as well. I think there's room for the strikeouts to improve again after 2024 was down a little bit. So I think he's probably maybe the new Aaron Nola, where it's like, if he's your ace, that's probably not great, but now you don't have to draft him that way. So you can live with the higher ERA. And he might be a good choice to pair with someone like Crochet, who has volume concerns, because Pablo at this point feels pretty, relative to the pitching position, safe. This is a weird range in the rankings where like a Garrett Cole 11, I don't know. That might be too high. It might be too low. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, another one where I don't really know how to value him. And I think Scott has him a little lower than this as well, if I remember from an earlier conversation. But like my position on Yamamoto's upside hasn't changed. Like he had a really good first season in the majors, despite some real difficulties along the way. If he manages to stay healthy this season and is a Cy Young finalist, I would not be at all surprised for Yamamoto there. So this is a weird range of the rankings as well.
Yeah. Garrett Cole for sure. I mean, there are a lot of tough pitchers to rank, but I would say, among the top 5 toughest, Cole, Strider, DeGrom, Glasnow, just trying to figure out where to put these guys who
all could be top 5 pitchers in terms of talent.
Yeah, 100%. The way Scott broke it down is he has Cole same spot as you, SP11, and he kind of just split the difference. He said this is kind of hedging the bet between Garrett Cole could return all the way back to form, and if he does, he's a top 3 starting pitcher, or maybe last year was kind of the start of, all right, he's declining a little bit, and maybe he doesn't throw that slider as much because the elbow isn't completely healthy. And,
and I will say, like, if I had to bet on one of those being more likely, it's probably the latter. Like he's a 34-year-old. Most guys don't age that way, right? Most guys don't decline in their mid-30s and then get back to being elite. Now, Justin Verlander just did it multiple times in his mid to late 30s. Remember when he left the Tigers, we were kind of like, okay, Justin Verlander's done. And then he goes to Houston and wins another Cy Young. You can't necessarily bet on everyone following that path, even though, Garrett Cole in terms of talent isn't that far off from Justin Verlander.
Your SP 16 through 20, you have Luis Castillo, Shota Imanaga, Blake Snell, Jacob deGrom, and Aaron Nola. So we've talked about some pitchers that you're higher on than Scott. One name that you are clearly lower is Blake Snell, who you have here at 18. Scott has at SP 8. And his main point was that you could say what you want about inconsistencies and stretches of looking really good and really bad. over the last 3 years, Snell has a 2.82 ERA, a 1.16 WHIP, 12 K per nine, and won a Cy Young. So I guess the inverse here, Chris. Why do you have Blake Snell so much lower than Scott?
I guess I'm kind of confused as to why we would rank Blake Snell much higher than we did last year. And he wasn't like he's still a free agent. We assume he's not going to sign in March again, but we don't know that right now. He's the same, like he's the same guy.
Yeah.
And we know
fair, I do think Scott ranked Snell pretty high last year too, though.
Yeah. And we know what the upside is on a per inning basis. But this is another guy who has only thrown, like, his track record for injuries is slightly better than Tyler Glasnow's, right? Like, he hasn't had the blow up like Tommy John season like Tyler Glasnow did a few years ago. He has surpassed 135 innings, something Tyler Glasnow I think did once in the minors, if you include that, but has never done it at the major league level. Snell has done it twice in a 9-year career. That's not nothing. But, you know, you look at the innings total the last 4 seasons, 128.2, 128, 180, 104. That is not a pitcher that we typically rank in the top 10. And so I get the upside. The other thing that you have to keep in mind, and this is more for drafting than ranking, but you have to keep in mind your own personal willingness to ride the Blake Snell roller coaster, because he has had ERAs in the 5+ range, like halfway through the season, I think in 3 of the past 4 years. And you can say, oh, well, last year it was just because he signed late. But if he does it every year, there's some reason that things go wrong for Blake Snell. And, you know, I remember, I think after last year or maybe after 2022, I think you had the stop throwing your changeup, Blake Snell, and you'll be fine. I think that was the storyline on Blake Snell. And it's just never as easy as we want it to be.
Yeah.
Like sometimes he has the feel for the slider. Sometimes he has the feel for the curveball. Sometimes he drops his arm slot. Sometimes he raises his arm slot. Sometimes the changeup is really good. I think the changeup was really good last year. And so it just all comes down to, we know how good Blake Snell can be. And maybe his best case scenario is higher than Garrett Crochet's. I tend to think they're probably a little similar. And I've just seen it go wrong for Blake Snell more often. Like, there's a lot of injuries in his career. He's never efficient. Like, he has never averaged 6 innings per start. I'm not sure he's ever come particularly close to 6 innings per start. And we care about that less now, but it's still like he needs to run like a 200 BABIP to come even close to 6 innings per start, which is what happened in 2023 and 2018, the only 2 seasons he's ever come close. So I just kind of don't want the headache, you know. Maybe that's oversimplifying. Maybe that's stupid. And like looking at this list, I should have Luis Castillo behind him. I have Luis Castillo a little too high. So like I could move him to 17 fairly easily, but I kind of just don't want to have to deal with it.
Yeah. And something I want to be more cognizant of in 2025 is the ratios, right? Look, if you play in a points league with Blake Snell, you laid it out. Like, you need him to be more efficient to consistently give you quality starts. So maybe he's someone you devalue a little bit in that format. But in category leagues, you know, ERA, WHIP, they've been problems for me. And if you take Blake Snell, I know he's coming off a 105 WHIP, but it's 122 for his career. So I would expect it to be more in like that, you know, 115 to 120 range. You have to consider that. You have to pair him with like a Bailey Ober or a George Kirby or someone like that. If you put him with Dylan Cease, yeah, you're going to get all the strikeouts in the world. You also might get like a 120 whip between your top 2 pitchers there. So,
and also the thing to keep in mind there is a lot of the later pitchers who like we can talk. Yusei Kikuchi, I think, is a good example of this. That there are Luis Heel. There are guys who like when you're filling out your staff and you're looking for your number 4, number 5, number 6 SPs. There are a lot of guys that are like, hey, this guy's going to get a lot of strikeouts. Those guys tend to have pretty bad whips. And
Spencer Arrighetti is
Arrighetti had like a 1.6 whip last year.
140, I think.
Yeah. And so like we expect him to be better in 2024. But if he's a really good strikeout pitcher with a 3.7 ERA, that might come with a 1.3 whip. And if you've already got Blake Snell as one of your anchors, that can be really tough to get ahead of. So it's just, I don't think I want that headache to be my particular headache. There are enough headaches at the starting pitcher position without taking on one that is going to be a headache.
Someone else that might be a headache here you have at SP19 is Jacob deGrom. He made his return from Tommy John late last season. Should be all good to go on opening day. Still seems electric, but he hasn't thrown more than 92 innings since 2019.
I have no idea. When I first started the SP process back in October, I think he was like SP 43. And I have seen people who have him in the top 10. And I have heard arguments that getting Tommy John surgery a second time was a good thing because it fixed the underlying issue to his. Maybe. I don't know. I have no idea what to do with Jacob deGrom. My ideal world is just I don't rank Jacob deGrom, and that way there's no paper trail for whatever happens this season. If he throws 140 innings and is the best pitcher in fantasy, that's on the table. He throws 80 innings and is still like top 30. That's also on the table. I'm very confident Jacob deGrom's going to be good, but I'm less confident that he's going to be good than I was before the Tommy John surgery, second Tommy John surgery for him. And I have no idea on the volume. Like he could throw 180 innings. Like this is not a situation where I think there's no chance he throws an ace workload. I think it's possible if he stays healthy. Like I don't think there's any world in which like Jacob deGrom is awesome all year, stays healthy, but only throws 140 innings because the Rangers they don't have any reason to hold him back like that. So
their competitive window is now.
Yeah, this is a team that needs to be trying to win World Series right now. And yes, they need to preserve Jacob deGrom, but I don't think there's any reason to think that the difference between Jacob deGrom staying healthy in October is throwing 140 innings in the regular season versus 170. So he is one of the pitchers who, if everything breaks right and he stays healthy, I think can get to 180 innings. He might throw 5. He might not get to the start of the season. I have no reason to believe in him. So this is another one where it's kind of splitting the difference between what I think the upside is, which is the best pitcher in baseball, and him being completely useless.
Yeah. And if this early ADP remains,
I'm not going to draft him.
I don't think anybody on this podcast is going to draft Jacob deGrom because his ADP is 40 as the 8th starting pitcher off the board right now.
No, I cannot in any world justify that.
Yeah. Let's take our final break. When we return, we've got 30 more pitchers in like 25.
Yeah, we got it.
So let's do that right after this.
Historic rivals with unforgettable seasons meet in a game of honor. The Army-Navy game presented by USAA, December 14th on CBS.
Welcome back in your SP 21 through 25 for next season. You have Logan Webb, Bailey Ober, Hunter Green, Max Fried, and Bryce Miller. So very clearly SP2-ish range, kind of like high floor volume guys. One name that stands out here is Hunter Green because I don't think that he kind of fits that mold. And he's another name that you have lower than Scott, who Scott has at SP18. Green had the breakout season. A lot of it was fueled by quality of contact. He also went on the IL with right elbow soreness and has a history of shoulder problems. So again, I haven't ranked yet, but I feel like I will probably be closer to where you have Hunter Green, Chris, maybe even lower because there are just some scary things in the profile overall for him.
Yeah, I could see lower. I have a hard time going higher. I know he was really good, and I think I was the highest one on him going into last season. And he had a really good season and did what we wanted to see. It's just we talked about it in the most recent podcast before Scott's, and he had this massive jump in quality of contact allowed. The expected WOBA on contact went from 384 to 307. 307 is a number you almost never see for starting pitchers, and you certainly almost never see it twice. So that's a really hard thing. It's a lot like Dylan Cease's breakout in 2022. where the strikeout rate actually went down. The walk rate basically stayed the same. The big differentiator was the quality of contact. And look, maybe the addition of the splitter, even though he only threw it 8% of the time, maybe that's enough to just get batters under the barrel, to get the barrel under the ball and not right on the ball. I could see that being an argument for it. That is a skill that takes a long time to stabilize. You should bet on regression when you have outliers either way. And Hunter Green before last season was very bad in terms of quality of contact allowed. I think you should probably project more like average and an ERA closer to the mid threes. And he's another one who I don't think has thrown more than, he's never thrown more than 150 innings at the major league level. Last year has to be by far the career high for him, even taking the minors. So, because he's been in the majors basically full time the last 3 years, right? So, I just think there are more ways it can go wrong, unfortunately, because I really like Hunter Green. I would love to be wrong.
Yeah, it's just a volatile profile. It's based on the skill set and the injury history too. There are a lot of studies that show when you throw upper 90s with the fastball, the likelihood of maintaining that velocity year over year without injury is not very good. So, Hunter Green had the elbow last year. He has a history of shoulder as well. So I do kind of worry about him overall moving forward as well. SP 26 through 30, you have Freddie Peralta, Hunter Brown, Zach Gallen, Joe Ryan, and Tyler Glasnow. So this is where things really start to open up between you and Scott. Somebody you're much higher on, Joe Ryan, Scott has at 38, you have at 29, and someone you're much lower on, you have Glasnow here at 30. Scott has him at SP 16. So Ryan had a strong season. He added velocity to his fastball. He did end the year with a grade 2 teres major strain in his right shoulder. And then Glasnow, he pitched well once again, but it's kind of the same old song and dance. He was limited to 22 starts, threw a career high 134 innings. He ended the season on the IL with an elbow sprain, did not appear in the postseason. So Chris, talk to me here about Joe Ryan and Tyler Glasnow.
I know Tyler Glasnow has said he's healthy right now. I don't know. I sure you're not pitching right now. So yeah, it's easier for you to be healthy. The one constant throughout Tyler Glasnow's career is when he pitches, he does not stay healthy. And I don't think there's any reason to change your expectations in that regard. I think you look at him and hope you get 134 innings again. And anything more than that is absolutely gravy. And he was more valuable than SP 30 in 134 innings last year. I think it was like SP 15 or something from what we talked about the other day. So maybe I'm being too low, but SP 30 is not the likeliest outcome here, right? If he sprains that elbow in June, you're probably talking about less than 100 innings from Tyler Glasnow on a team that we know needs to limit his innings because all they care about is being healthy in October. They're going to do everything they can to limit the injury risk for Tyler Glasnow. So I think with that one, again, I'm just kind of done chasing the upside. And if he falls, he falls, and I'll take a risk. It makes it really hard to build a staff with a guy like that. And then Joe Ryan, I don't understand why you and Scott hate Joe Ryan. You hate
I haven't ranked yet, so I might have him around here. I don't know.
You hit him last year.
I did hate him last year.
He had the 4.50 ERA last year, and I get the concerns there. But then he comes out in 2024, another guy who tinkers constantly. I don't see much difference between Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober. I think they're both elite whip guys. 110, 117, 099 for Joe Ryan over the past 3 seasons. Ober a little better, but I think they're also both guys with a lot of ERA volatility. But Joe Ryan, he added the slider or the sweeper last year, threw the splitter more. I think he reworked the splitter as well. It was a harder version of the splitter. So that was a new pitch for him. And it was, quite good. So I don't know, man. I don't really get the, there's the injury, I guess, is the knock against Joe Ryan, but I kind of think he's just a super solid pitcher, and I'm not sure there should be much daylight at all between him and Bailey Ober.
Let's find out based on early ADP, Bailey Ober is 86.9.
I would assume Ober's much higher. Everybody seems to.
Joe Ryan is 104.7. So
that's not
about
huge
20 picks apart. But I could see the argument for those guys potentially being closer in ADP and ranking with Bailey Ober and Joe Ryan. SP 31 through 35, you have Spencer Strider, Justin Steele, Spencer Schwellenbach, Grayson Rodriguez, and Carlos Rodon. Strider, as we mentioned earlier, will be a hot topic this offseason. We know he will not be ready for opening day. He's recovering from internal brace surgery that he had on his right elbow. And frankly, Chris, we don't know what he's going to look like.
No idea.
We don't have a big track record of starting pitchers returning from internal brace surgery. And we have Strider, and we might even have Ohtani. They never really revealed what kind of
I think so.
had, but I kind of feel like it's the internal brace. So what we do know is if Strider's right, he has SP1 upside. But will he be right? And when will he be on the mound? Those are massive questions.
Yeah, right now it's impossible to rank him. Like we have to, and so this is where we land. But he might not pitch until June. He might be terrible. Like we genuinely do not have a robust enough track record for the internal brace to say with a lot of confidence what he's going to look like. And I tend to be a little more optimistic because the damage to his UCL last year apparently was not as severe as feared. It was not fully torn. And so I'm hopeful that this does not end up being, a career-defining injury, but it absolutely could be. It's well within the range of possibility. So I really just, I to a certain extent, I just throw my hands up and again, split the difference and say, this guy could be a top 5 starting pitcher in baseball from the moment he debuts, and he might debut on April 15th. Right now, we just don't know. He might be pitching in spring training and look awful. He might average 94 miles per hour with his fastball and just drop like a rock. That's certainly possible, but I'm going to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt right now.
Yeah, Strider seems like a name that could move a lot from now till when we get to March. The ADP is 125 for Strider. If you told me he looks great in spring, they're talking about, all right, he's only going to miss a month. Maybe he's a top 100 pick. If he looks terrible, like you mentioned, maybe he's closer to 200. So this is one that still could move a lot over the next couple months in Spencer Strider. SP 36 through 40.
I did want to mention, did you ask about Carlos Rodon?
I did not, but you can quickly talk about it.
I do want to mention one thing with him, which is he was just much better in the second half. 3 ERA on the dot. It was a 4 FIP, so that's a little concerning. I think that was mostly due to an inflated home run rate, 12 home runs and 13 starts. I don't know how much I worry about that, but one thing I did discover as I was going through at the end of the season is his slider was much improved in the second half. It was a 241 xWOBA through the end of June, a 38% whiff rate. In the second half, since July 1st, 181 xWOBA, 40.3% whiff rate. Fastball also was better in the second half. So that is a big deal for me because Rodon has always kind of gone as his 4-seamer and his especially slider go. So I'm a little more optimistic on him as a result of that. I think the cutter is a failed experiment. I know there's a lot of there's a theory out there that the value in a cutter doesn't come from the cutter itself, but from the way it interacts with other pitches. Maybe the fact that the cutter was pretty mediocre helps everything else play up. I'm not 100% sure on that, but the changeup was actually solid.
No, it was really
good. So I think there's a path for Carlos Rodon to be more like what he was in the second half.
The changeup overall for Rodon, it was a 221 expected WOBA with a 49.5% whiff rate. So it was pretty awesome. While you were talking, I wanted to look up the second half stuff plus numbers on his slider. It did get a little bit better. It went from 143 in the first half to 146. And just so anyone listening, stuff plus 100 is average. So
although it's weird,
amazing.
Yeah, sliders tend to be higher on the stuff plus spectrum, but yeah, he has a very good slider. I don't think that's controversial.
SP 36 through 40, you have Sonny Gray, Jack Flaherty, Tanner Bybee, Shane O'Mac.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
That would be Shane McClanahan and Brian Wu down at SP 40. I asked Scott about McClanahan. He's another one that feels really tough to rank, Chris. Coming back from a second Tommy John surgery. Kind of feels like a coin flip in terms of, success rate as of now.
Mm-hmm.
Nathan Eovaldi has been fine after a second Tommy John. He's had a great career. And Walker Buehler, we just saw struggle massively in his first season back from a second Tommy John surgery. So Shane McClanahan, I don't, he's no different. I mean, he's, it could go one of two ways.
And the reason he's lower, I guess, I didn't end up, there's a name missing from this discussion. Shohei Ohtani should probably be in like the Spencer Strider range. And that's an oversight on my part. So just bump everyone down in your mental model as we move forward. The thing with McClanahan, and the reason I have him ranked lowest of the kind of big four injury concern guys, I'm counting DeGrom, Strider, Ohtani, and McClanahan, although you also have Sandy Alcantara and Garrett Cole to a certain extent. There's plenty of pitchers dealing with injuries. The reason I have McClanahan lowest is it's a second Tommy John surgery. It's a full Tommy John. And I think there is a perception of Shane McClanahan that is a little different than how he actually pitched. The ERAs have been very good, 343, 254, 329. But when you actually look into the numbers, there have been red flags in 2 of the 3 seasons. 2022, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball by any way you want to measure it. 2021, which is his rookie season, strikeout rate was 27%, good but not elite. Walk rate 7.2%, a little better than average but not much. xERA 4.57. Then 2023, he has a 3.29 ERA, which is again very good. Strikeout rate down to 26%. That's still good, but that is far from elite at that point. And walk rate up to 9%. xERA 4.10. You have the expected WOBA on contact has been pretty bad in 2 of his 3 seasons. The one where it was good is the one that he was, one of the best pitchers in baseball. But that's another one where I look at the track record and I think this is a guy who's been a good pitcher for the most part, but hasn't necessarily been lights out every time out. And he's coming back from a Tommy John surgery. I just think there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical with Shane McClanahan, who, again, if he's a top 10 pitcher, I wouldn't be shocked. It just, I think there's a lot of ways it can go wrong.
And now the Tampa Bay Rays have to play outdoors.
Much worse ballpark.
So George M. Steinbrenner Field, it has the same dimensions as Yankee Stadium. The humidity there, the heat, the ball should fly out. There's going to be some rain delays. So it's going to be kind of a messy season here coming up for the Tampa Bay Rays. And
he's a guy who's gotten hit hard in the past. That could be a bad combination.
Yeah. So definitely worth considering that as well. SP 41 through 45, you have Jared Jones, Sandy Alcantara, Kodai Senga, Kevin Gausman, and Ronaldo Lopez. So Gausman is someone Scott did not have in his top 50 at all. He took a huge step back last year, 3.83 ERA, a 1.22 whip. The strikeouts came way down. This ranking here, I mean, you don't need him to be amazing, but this is a ranking where you still think Kevin Gausman could be serviceable. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the show, I said I'm malleable. I'm open to being talked out, and I don't feel good about it. No, I do think Kevin Gausman is someone I probably need to move down. I think ranking him here is just kind of baking in the possibility that he bounces back. And I do think there is that possibility. Remember, he went into last season with that shoulder injury that he suffered in spring training, gutted it out, made 181 innings and 31 starts. He was out there, but clearly wasn't himself. The splitter especially was not nearly as effective as it's been in the past. I think there were probably some arm slot changes there. And I think we probably need to see him in spring training and see what the stuff looks like and see. Cause he dropped his arm slot a little bit, pitched a little bit more horizontally, and that's going to hurt the splitter shape. So we'll need to see in spring training what it looks like, but I think I want to move him down from here.
Yeah, people looking just at the surface level numbers, the second half for Gausman, he had a 2.92 ERA, but that also came with a 4.85 xFIP, 6.8 K per nine, and just an 18.8% strikeout rate. So,
Yeah, 2 to 1 K to walk ratio, which is bad.
Very, very misleading there for Kevin Gausman. Our friend Nick Pollock from Pitcher List has Gausman ranked all the way down at SP 76. So
Nick hates splitters more than anything in the world, so that makes sense.
He is completely out on Kevin Gausman. SP 46 through 50, you have Yusei Kikuchi, now of the Angels, followed by Luis Gil, Shane Baz, Ryan Pepio, and Seth Lugo. 3 names Scott did not have in his top 50 were Gil, Baz, and Pepio. Chris, do you think Gil takes another step forward? And we just talked about the ballpark change for Shane McClanahan. Once that came out, did you lower Pepio and Shane Baz at all, or did you not really factor it into this ranking early on?
I have not yet, and Baz admittedly is sort of a bet on him getting better.
Because I leap of faith ranking kind of.
Yeah, I don't think the way I know the ERA actually ended up being, pretty viable. 3.06 ERA, 3.62 xERA as well. He was an average at best strikeout pitcher. He didn't really have a swing and miss pitch he could lean on. I'm kind of just ranking him here as a bet that Shane Baz takes a step forward, and it's a soft ranking. I will say Pepio, I am actually pretty in on, because for one thing, the one consistent throughout his major league career, which last year is most of it, but he had, pitched around in the previous 2 seasons, is the quality of contact has just been exceptional for Ryan Pepio. He has a 351 expected WOBA on contact for his career. That's over 3,500 pitches and about 200 innings. That has been true as a starter. It's been true when he was used in relief. It's been true when his control has been bad. It's been true when his control has been great. It's the one consistent. He's got a very good fastball that limits hard contact well. He has the good approach angle, tons of whiffs with the 4-seamer as well, 32% whiff rate last year. That was an elite mark. It was one of the best for any starters. And then you have the changeup, which is already a good pitch, but I think there is room for the changeup to grow as a swing and miss pitch and elevate Ryan Pepio even more. So when you talk about that park change, the fact that he limits hard contact really well, I think is a very good thing for Ryan Pepio. And I am willing to bet on further growth from Ryan Pepio. He is one of the pitcher breakouts that I'm betting on this year.
He is someone going into the offseason, I wanted to be excited about. This change to the ballpark they're going to be playing in. I think maybe it could affect someone like Pepio more than others, because he is more of a fly ball pitcher, nearly 46% fly ball rate, 9.1% barrel rate, ranks in the 22nd percentile. So
that's the weird thing about him, is when he gets hit hard, he gets hit hard.
Yeah.
He just doesn't get hit hard very often. So that's a fair point, because home runs are inherently rare events. But if you go from, 20 to 28 home runs allowed, that's only 8 pitches over the course of your whole season, but it can drastically change the way the pitcher looks. So I could see him being affected by that more than you would think based on the overall quality of contact metrics. And the other thing to keep in mind is, I can't remember, we might have talked about this a little bit, but Tropicana Field, I wrote about this for the newsletter, and it's on cbssports.com now, but Tropicana Field is not just a good place because of the dimensions, a good place to pitch. It's also arguably the biggest stuff elevator of any ballpark in baseball, or at least it has been. I really want to cite the.
I don't have anything on the stuff metrics, but I'll quickly fill in some air while you're looking for that. Over the past 3 seasons, Tropicana Field had the 4th highest strikeout park factor. So, and we've talked about hitters, struggling to see the ball there, just with the batter's eye. Willie Adames talked about it. It's tough to see the ball there. He wasn't the only one. So it is a ballpark that helps strikeouts play up. So that was another thing. It's just like these little things, little reasons to all right, maybe you want to tick down Rays pitchers a little bit for the strikeouts. Now they're going to be pitching outdoors in a park where, there's a shorter porch to right field. So as a right-handed pitcher, you're facing left-handed bats. It's just like for every one of these little things, like you got to knock these guys down a notch. So it just worries me a little bit.
And so here's the stat that I wanted to cite. It's from Thomas Nestico at TJ Stats on social media. And he put together a list of the opposing pitcher stuff in each ballpark. So this is taking out the stuff of the pitchers on each team. It's just looking at the opposing pitchers. So you would think that would take out a lot of the noise, right? You're facing all 29 teams. The Rays had by far the highest opposing pitcher stuff plus metric last season, and that's at their home park. So that suggests, and this is a stat that does not have a lot of movement. Most teams are with right around 100. They're at 102.3. The second place team was 101.9. So there is evidence that the ball moves differently in Tropicana Field. I don't know if it's a combination of a moist environment, but being played indoors. I'm not sure what it is, but this is not even like the lights and the batter's eye would not play into this. This is just how the pitches move themselves. The pitches moved in an advantageous way. And that is probably why you get more strikeouts. It's probably why, despite having somewhat favorable home dimensions, Tropicana has played as a pitcher's park. So there's a lot of uncertainty with every Rays pitcher. And I think being skeptical of them all is a reasonable approach. And maybe I'll get there. Maybe that'll be one of the changes that I make as we get through this process. I think there's a chance that the Rays at Steinbrenner Field are like one of the top 5 hitting environments in baseball. Between short porches, I know it's deep power alleys, but that'll inflate BABIP, if anything. Short porches for home runs. Weather should be very good. And just the ballparks, we talked about this in a recent episode, but those rain delays are going to knock, 6 starts over the course of the season, where a pitcher who you hope would go 5 innings ends up going 2 because of the rain. Like, that's going to happen a few times next year. We don't know who that's going to affect, but it's going to impact the Rays pitchers on the whole. So I think in every direction, the Rays moving their home park is pretty bad news for their pitching staff. And maybe I'm too optimistic about Pepio and Boz and McClanahan and Taj Bradley, even, who's not in the top 50. Yeah, I'm open to that.
All right. Well, there you have it. Chris's top 50 starting pitchers. If you want to scrutinize, well, you know where to find them. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thanksgiving is tomorrow, so enjoy the holiday. Happy anniversary to you, Chris. So there you go. Lots going on. But yes, thank you to all the listeners for your support and obviously listening throughout the entire year. We're obviously very thankful for you. We're going to wrap there for Chris. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.